What made this case so unusual was that the crime scene was burned, but not necessarily to destroy evidence.
In Miami, Florida, a woman's body is found next to some railroad tracks.
The victim was found in a place where her death should have attracted a lot of attention, but strangely, it didn't.
At first, investigators wonder if the death might be an accident.
There was no clear motive in this case, and we all suspected this may only be the beginning.
The Allapattah Produce District in downtown Miami buzzes with activity during the day. But one summer night, a startling discovery puts the whole community on edge. At 1 o'clock in the morning, the Miami Police Department receives a call reporting the discovery of a woman's body. Detective Jose Granado is the first investigator to arrive at the scene.
This is the location where the victim's body was discovered by a homeless individual who was walking along the railroad tracks, and upon discovering the body, he contacted a police officer.
But as investigators approach the body, they notice something unusual.
When we got here, the one thing that was heavy in the air was that smell of accelerant. And the whole crime scene was burnt. We had a burning area all in the crime scene up in here.
At this point, investigators can't be sure if the fire has any significance at all, since they don't yet know who the woman is or how she died.
We had the victim that was laying out by the railroad tracks. Now, we didn't know if she had fallen and struck her head on the railroad tracks. We didn't know if this was an accident, a suicide.
Is it possible that the victim somehow started the fire herself? Investigators just don't know. Ultimately, fingerprints identify the victim as 44-year-old Vita Hicks, the mother of 2 children. Hicks had moved to Miami from North Carolina a few years ago. But how did she end up on a Miami railroad track? Even after the medical examiner's report comes in, investigators still can't be certain if they're looking at an accident or a homicide.
Once we received the medical examiner's report and we learned that the cause of death was blunt trauma, we were still thinking along the terms of an accident. Could she have fallen, struck her head on the railroad tracks, and died of an accidental death?
Then, 9 weeks later, another disturbing discovery. The body of 42-year-old Diane Nelms is discovered at the same location and under nearly identical circumstances.
She was on the railroad tracks approximately 20 feet away from where Ms. Hicks' body was discovered. There was burning in the area. The smell of accelerant was still in the air. The similarities were striking at that moment.
2 bodies in the same location and 2 fires. Investigators don't believe it's a coincidence. The medical examiner's report offers nothing to contradict that view.
We discovered that Ms. Nelms died from blunt trauma to the head, and that was a striking resemblance to the way that Ms. Hicks died. So now we start thinking into the area of a homicide, and a double homicide at that.
But if a serial killer is on the loose, police have no idea why he's targeting these particular victims or setting the fires afterwards. With so little physical evidence to go on, investigators hope that a psychological profile of the killer will bring them one step closer to catching him. One of the profilers on the team is Special Agent Dale Hinman.
Criminals often leave behind behavioral clues that tell us something about them. We thought the setting of the fires at the 2 scenes was significant, but we didn't know the reason for the fires.
And Hinman believes it's only a matter of time before he strikes again.
What really stood out about these cases was not just the fact that the victims were killed at the same location and in the same manner, but how similar the victims were. They were about the same age, they lived in the same neighborhood, they shared the same lifestyle. These were not random crimes, and none of us thought he was done.
At the site of the two crime scenes, Agent Hinman and Detective Granado start by asking a simple question. Why did the killer choose this location twice?
This is where the second victim was found, and the first victim was about 20 feet away, and if you can see right here on the map, you'll see the locations, which were very close to each other.
What was this area like at the time of the crime?
This area here was completely covered in brush.
And this would offer a lot of security for the offender as well, because he could hide, and if someone was walking by, he could also use them for shelter or for concealment as well.
The choice of location makes Hinman think the killer is probably someone familiar with the area, likely a local resident.
It seems that this individual is blending in with the surroundings, so he probably has some connection to this area, because he can just basically come here and not raise any suspicion from anybody who's passing through here at all.
Hinman is less certain what to make of the two fires that were set.
The interesting here is, as you can see right over here, is exactly how high the fire went up.
Oh, yeah. So in the first case, he started a little fire, and then this one here just got out of control.
To Hinman, the inconsistent fires seem more like the work of a beginner than an experienced criminal trying to destroy evidence. A profile is starting to emerge. Someone who lives in the area, a local who's hiding in plain sight. But before police can get anywhere, the killer may have struck again. Just a couple of miles from the first two scenes, the body of 37-year-old Cheryl Lee Ray is found at the City of Miami Cemetery. And her mysterious death just might be the work of the Miami serial killer. At the cemetery, Agent Hinman meets with Detective Confessor Gonzalez to compare this crime scene to the first two.
This is the location where the third victim was killed. She was found laying on the ground. She also had blunt trauma. Homicide was very consistent with the murder of the first two victims.
And just like the first two crime scenes, the area has been burned.
So essentially, the victims are all similar in age and appearance. The same criminal activity occurred at all three locations, and the locations of all three of the crimes are very close together. I agree with you. I believe you have the same offender.
And after three homicides, profilers recognize another pattern.
Where was the victim the last time anybody saw her?
This victim was known to sit at the bus bench, which is directly on Northeast 2 Avenue, which is the main entrance of the cemetery, directly in front of us. That's where she was regularly seen.
So essentially, the offender moved the victim only from that location to here, and in the first two crimes, the offender remained in the immediate area where the victim was last seen.
The perpetrator finds and kills his victims in the same place. A significant clue in the hands of a profiler.
This crime certainly doesn't require a vehicle because he's not moving the victims to any significant degree from where they were last seen.
Since the killer doesn't need a car, investigators look for someone who travels around the neighborhood on foot or possibly on a bicycle. As police hit the streets, a promising new lead soon arises. Several witnesses describe seeing the third victim, Cheryl Ray, talking with a man shortly before her death.
Witnesses indicated to us that Cheryl Ray was seen with a black male known as Dread. Dread is a very common street name used for individuals who keep their hair in dreadlocks. Once we interviewed the last witnesses that had seen this individual, Dread, we contacted a forensic artist and made arrangements to create a composite immediately.
As the artist sketches, feature by feature, an image emerges. Could this be the face of the man who killed 3 women and then set fire to the crime scenes?
Once we obtained a composite sketch, we went out there, we saturated the neighborhood.
The response is overwhelming.
You don't know how many dreads are out there till you start looking for one.
Investigators scramble to follow up on hundreds of leads. But it may be too late. 3 women in downtown Miami have been murdered in the same neighborhood. Profilers are sure there's a serial killer at large who lives or works in the area. Police suspect a local man named Dread, but they can't find him.
This case was very difficult. The police were pursuing hundreds of leads trying to catch this offender and prevent the next murder. We all knew the community was living in fear.
And now, the Miami serial killer may have struck again. This time, the victim is 38-year-old Janice Cox, but there's been a change in the killer's MO. The crime scene isn't outside. It's inside an abandoned gas station. It's up to Agent Hinman and the profiling team to determine if this is indeed the work of the same killer.
We came to the conclusion that he entered to this door here, which was the only door in the building that was not forced open. It appeared to have all damage consistent with someone that was breaking into the place at an earlier time. And we theorized that they picked this location as a place of opportunity on this day.
I wonder if there's some other reason why he moved indoors after the first 3 crimes. What was the police presence in the area like?
We saturated the area with additional patrol units, so it was definitely a heavy police presence in the area.
Well, that would certainly make sense for him to move inside because he's trying not to get caught by all the extra officers who were on patrol in the area.
As in the other 3 killings, a fire was set, but it wasn't a big fire, and that may be significant.
It's an old gas station. It still has some old flammable cans in the area, as well as a lot of flammable materials. You have paper, you have wood. Had he chosen to do so with very minimal effort, he could have burned the whole building down.
So since you have a small fire at all 4 of these locations, it's much more likely that he didn't set the fire to destroy evidence or to change the scene, but he started the fires because it was a reason that was important to him.
Investigators begin to speculate that the fires might have a ritual importance to the killer. And in this latest case, police think they may have discovered a tangible physical clue. On a broken ceiling tile, a trace of transmission fluid appears in the shape of a boot print. Now, technicians must figure out a way to enhance the image to learn more about the boot that made it. Crime scene investigator Lazaro Fernandez steps up to the task. In this demonstration, he uses his own boot to make a similar impression to the one found at the scene. Because the fluid print is so fragile, he must first conduct a test to make sure the process won't destroy the evidence they are trying to preserve.
Once I had the solution prepared, transmission and water, saturated the bottom of the boot, was able to blot it dry on a piece of paper, the same distance that we had found the tile at, left the print on the tile.
To bring out the invisible details of the print, Fernandez applies a magnetic black powder. The process works. A few strokes of the brush, and a clear image emerges.
We can get the length of the boot to indicate a size. We can see the type of pattern along the lug on the outside of the boot, as well as the lugs on the inside of the boot.
They apply the technique to the print found at the crime scene, and then turn their attention to finding the shoe that made it.
Different manufacturers were contacted in that effort. However, that was not something that was very fruitful. We weren't able to establish particularly where the shoe was sold or distributed, or narrow it down to one particular retail store.
Without a suspect shoe to compare it to, the print, for now, is worthless. But perhaps it's not the pattern of the print, but the killer's pattern that investigators should be studying. And the profiling team has a plan.
The fact that this killer has such a specific pattern of attack suggested to us he may have tried this before. Perhaps there were other women in this immediate area who were approached by someone that they thought was suspicious, and they were able to get away. Perhaps if we could identify these women, we could come up with some new leads.
The profilers are on the right track. When investigators search their files over the last several months, they uncover a report that seems to mirror parts of the killer's pattern.
A local woman complained to the police that she had been assaulted by an individual. She had been hit in the back of the head, and she indicated to the officers that the individual was on a bicycle, and that she would recognize him again if she saw him.
It's just the kind of story the profilers were hoping to find.
In all of the homicides, the victims died from blunt force trauma to the head. This was the same type of injury that was sustained by the survivor victim, and she was attacked in the same area. She was able to provide us a good description of the subject, and she said he was riding a bicycle at the time of the attack. We all thought this was the same killer.
Investigators can only wait and hope that the killer can be identified before he claims another victim. And this time, detectives get lucky.
Our victim spotted an individual on a bicycle that she identified as the person that had assaulted her earlier. She flagged down a police officer, uniform officer, who detained the individual.
The man identifies himself as Francisco Del Junco, and he's carrying several suspicious items.
They discovered that the individual on the bicycle carried a small bottle wrapped in a towel, and the bottle contained gasoline as well as large matches. Additionally, the detectives noticed that the individual was wearing boots.
Is this the man responsible for the deaths of 4 women, or just another dead end? When body of evidence returns, after months of fruitless searching for the mysterious Dread, Miami police finally have their sights on a solid suspect, a man named Francisco Del Junco.
When the police picked up Del Junco, he became their #1 suspect. He was carrying gasoline, matches, wearing work boots, he lived in the immediate area of the attacks, and he was riding a bicycle. We all thought he was the serial killer.
But investigators still have to prove it. They start with their one piece of solid physical evidence, Del Junco's boots.
Those boots were submitted to the lab for comparison with our shoe prints that were found at the scene of our 4th homicide, and subsequently the pattern on the shoes was matched to the pattern on the shoe print lifted from that scene.
Police are now certain that Del Junco was at the 4th crime scene, but it doesn't necessarily mean he's the Miami serial killer. At this stage, police don't even have enough to arrest him. What they really need is a confession, and the profilers think it might be possible to get one if they don't follow the usual procedures.
In order to get Del Junco to confess, we needed to come up with a highly specialized interview strategy. We weren't going to be able to rush him. The police needed to spend time with him to develop a rapport to make him feel comfortable enough to open up.
Detectives integrate themselves into Del Junco's daily routine, acting more friendly than intimidating.
We would take him home at night at his request and pick him up next morning, allow him time to sleep, get him breakfast, lunch, and dinner, whatever it took. It's at the point that we would go pick him up in the morning. He was waiting for us, like getting ready to go to work. And he would even joke with us, kid around, talk. He was becoming like one of the guys.
They interview him at the police station and record the sessions on videotape.
Te sientes que hemos podido descargar bien, te ha...
Sí, como no sé. ¿Cómo se dice? Me siento más en confianza como usted.
After nearly a week of constant attention, the strategy pays off. Perhaps feeling the need to unburden himself to a sympathetic audience, Del Junco confesses to the crimes. He even volunteers to reenact what happened at each of the crime scenes.
And we're out here with Mr. Del Junco. He's pointing out the location where he picked up victim 1 and 2.
Voy a hacerlo con tiempo, lo estoy viendo clarito que lo dice, que sí, estamos mirando la televisión también, sí. Así que posiblemente por eso...
Que con esta sí tuviste sexo.
Ajá. Me puse
¿La bicicleta?
La bicicleta aquí así en esta posición, en vez de así, entonces...
¿Tú tenías...?
Encendí el foco y sí.
¿Tenías
la botellita contigo?
Cuidado que está mojado. ¿La tenías en el bolsillo o tuviste que ir a la bicicleta a buscarla?
No, la tenía en bolsillo.
Okay.
Following the confession, Del Junco was arrested and charged with multiple counts of first-degree murder. When pressed for a motive, Del Junco cites his belief in a religion called Santeria.
One of the theories, based on what he told us, was that he would hear voices. He particularly mentioned a black Santeria lady that he associated with.
But to Detective Gonzalez, a more common motive, rejection by women, may have played a part.
Another theory that I had was based on my initial conversation with him. He indicated to me about a girl that he liked, that he took home to live with him, and how she took advantage of him and broke his heart. And left him, and it wasn't much longer after that our first victim was killed.
At his trial, Francisco Del Junco receives 4 consecutive life sentences.
Even though Del Junco confessed to all the homicides he committed, he never gave us a reason for why he set the fires, but in the end it didn't matter. He clearly knew what he was doing was wrong. Through perseverance and the dedicated efforts of so many people, this predator finally got exactly what he deserved: the rest of his life behind bars.